In Ben Stiller's 1994 directorial debut, Reality Bites, Janeane Garofalo's Vickie Miner has become an iconic representation of 90s alternative culture. Vickie was possibly the first mainstream movie character to authentically represent what alt-girl culture actually looked like. The costume choices were particularly effective because they felt authentic to the 90s alt-girl aesthetic, and lived in rather than a costume. The whole aesthetic, the vintage dresses, the oversized sunglasses, the lunchbox bag, the Bettie Page bangs, were already the established look of alternative women, but Garofalo was one of the first actresses to bring it to major film in a way that felt real. The Bettie Page hair. It was always a strong 90s alternative girl look. Like, there was a period in time, if you were having your fringe this short and this style, you were certainly alternative. It wasn't for the normies. And of course, Bettie Page was a 1950s pin-up model whose own image has been reclaimed. Bettie Page has been both celebrated and censored for her unapologetic sexuality and alternative beauty, making her the perfect icon for 90s alt girls who similarly reject conventional standards. And this hairstyle was all about DIY, get the scissors out yourself, cut your own short fringe. And it's a hairstyle that can be replicated easily. It's a style that requires attitude more than technique. And it's just great in this movie how they actually are using the Bettie Page short alt girl fringe, because in mainstream movie they could have gone way more standard. The whole look in this movie is just really truly authentic to the 90s alt girls. And of course within the 90s as well, along with the Bettie Page, within the Riot Girl scene and the Kinder Whore look, and reclaiming these older icons as a rebellious femininity, Baby Doll and Blanche Dubois. Janeane Garofalo brought a lived-in authenticity to this role that came both from her comedic background and her age. At nearly 30 years old when she played this role, she brought this lived-in authenticity because she'd actually been there. Within the casting process itself, apparently Gwyneth Paltrow and Parker Posey both auditioned for the role of Vickie, but Ben Stiller and Winona Ryder specifically wanted Janeane for the role. And she certainly has an authentic edge that you can't fake. And she gave the character a depth and believability that couldn't be manufactured through costume and acting alone. What also made Vickie a perfect representation of 90s alt-girl culture was she wasn't waiting around for anyone to complete her story. She had her job at Gap. She was unapologetically sexual and emotionally complex and didn't need to be defined by her relationship with men. The movie allowed her to be messy and complicated without punishing her for it, which reflected how alternative culture was actually approaching female independence at the time. When she deals with the HIV scare storyline, the film treats her sexual agency as completely normal, rather than something scandalous. So, now, decades later, we can see how Vickie was an authentic representation of 90s alt-girl culture. She showed mainstream audiences what the scene actually looked like. The character also represented an important moment in the evolution of the cool girl trope. She was cool, but not because she was the fantasy of a male writer, but because she refused to compromise her authentic self for anyone else's comfort. Vickie's coolness came from an unwillingness to perform traditional feminine ideas, and she had a sharp intelligence and wit and refused to apologise for taking up space. In Garofalo's very capable hands, Vickie became a fully realised character whose influence on style, attitude and female representation in film continues to resonate decades later. For a generation of young women coming of age in the 90s, Vickie wasn't just a character, she was a possibility, a template for how to be alternative, independent and authentically cool. Next time you watch Reality Bites, pay attention to Vickie. She really is one of the true captures of the alternative 90s look, and certainly an alt-girl look. She didn't invent this aesthetic, but she is the perfect example in a movie of what alternative women in the 90s looked like.